Good afternoon. Welcome to Business as Usual. This is Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council, and I'm joined today by Jonathan Kirsting, who is the Vice President of Visibility at the Technology Council, as well as overseeing all things media and visibility. So a few things about today's call. I want to give a shout out of deep appreciation to both Huntington Bank and AT&T for their sponsorship and engagement in the community across these last 10, 11 weeks, that many of us have been looking for small business loans and things that have been given out to, eligible companies. Huntington Bank has been key. They are the largest SBA lender in the region. AT&T has been tremendous in terms of their engagement in the community, helping people who are needing food as well as having access to technology. Couldn't ask for better partners, and if you don't know them well enough, you need to. So a quick programming note: tomorrow, even though it is the weekend of Memorial Day weekend, we have a show. We have an amazing show with Mike Moe, who is a deep friend of ours from Silicon Valley and has led the creation of GSV Capital. Great friend of ours as well as the region, and he's going to give some advice for Pittsburgh-based entrepreneurs and share some of his insights. Next week, in terms of Memorial Day, Monday, we will not be having a show, but Tuesday, we will be back on and with the first and second place winners of last weekend's Civic Hackathon. For those of you who follow us, you know that Ryan Gent on our team has joined forces with Kit Mueller to host our first all virtual Civic Hackathon. And more than 90 people participating. We're very excited about having the winners on that show. So we're excited about that because it's really impactful in terms of what they did in 48 hours. On Wednesday, we go live with Harry Mosley, Global CIO of Zoom. And we're looking forward to learning more about not just what they do in these crazy times, but their opening up of a Pittsburgh office in the middle of it all. And then Thursday, we'll be hosting State Representative Dan Frankel, who will be discussing legislation that he's championed to enhance Pennsylvania's process for contact tracing. So that's really important for us. And then Friday, we wrap the week up with the chairman and CEO of Essential, which is the new company that acquired People's Gas right here in Western Pennsylvania. So a little bit about the format for the call. We've actually muted everyone except for our guest. And we do that to make sure that everyone can, keep their background noise to a minimum and just focus on the conversation that we're going to have here today. You also have a chat, so you can ask Meredith from Wigle Whiskey questions. Just make sure that you're not advertising your company. Just say who you are and the company. So I am thrilled. I'm going to jump in, and I want to bring on our guest, who is Meredith Meyer Grelli, and she is the co-founder of Wigle Whiskey. So if you don't know about Wigle and you've lived in Pittsburgh, shame on you, because they have been doing just incredible things. So I'm going to let her come on board, come to the forefront, and just tell us, what's the history of Wigle?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to spend the lunch hour with you all. So we started Wigle we started working on Wigle in 2010. And at that point, it took about 2 years because we wanted to create a spirits company that was a bit different in structure than a traditional spirits company. So if we were, before 2010, really the very earliest movers in the spirits movement really created spirit companies in the model of the big national companies. So that model is you make a single spirit, you become as efficient as possible and distribute it as widely as possible. We looked at that model and said, well, that's interesting, but we're never going to win that model. Diageo is always going to beat us in sales and marketing. Instead, we really envisioned a community-based craft alcohol company, more in the model of what craft beer makers had done over the past decade or two. And that focused on innovation and bringing this super regional area of consumers back to us again and again. So in 2010, we started working on legislation that would allow small producers to sample and sell directly to consumers in the state of Pennsylvania. at the same time that we were lobbying to change that law, we were also working on building out a space in the Strip District, our current distillery. And we were having a still built for us in Munich, Germany. And so, you know, while we were lobbying, we weren't quite sure if it was all going to work, but we just kept pushing forward on all fronts. And the legislation we were working on passed in December of 2011. And we were able to open our doors after a public comment period in March of 2012. So since that time, we've certainly grown in sort of every respect. We've grown our production, our portfolio. We've grown from one site to a number of sites. We have 7 total sites now across the Western Pennsylvania region, including our sister company, Threadbare Cider and Mead. We have 2 sites for Threadbare Cider as well, and we are distributed in 12 states.
Meredith, you have a really cool name for your company, and it pays homage to the Whiskey Rebellion, and I'm a total history dork. Could you tell us about the name Wigle?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of a silly name, but for a heck of a guy. So we named the company after Philip Wigle, who was a whiskey rebel in 1790s Pittsburgh. So in the 1790s, Western Pennsylvania was the epicenter of whiskey making in America and was for the first 200 years of American history. So if you were drinking pre-Prohibition in America, you were most likely drinking Monongahela rye whiskey made in Pittsburgh. So Pittsburghers were really good at making this whiskey. We were producing at the height of it about a half a barrel for every man, woman, and child living in America. And in the 1790s, Alexander Hamilton, who was, of course, our first Secretary of the Treasury and was in a pretty tough spot as we came out of the Revolutionary War. We were deep in debt. He tried to come up with the first excise tax in American history to get us out of debt, and he came up with a whiskey tax, which really pissed off everyone in Pittsburgh. So our guy, Philip Wigle, he was described in historical documents is actually kind of dumb, but he was very passionate, and we really we identified with him when we were starting the company because he was sort of a passionate guy that got in way over his head. And he punched a federal tax collector that came to town to collect on Hamilton's tax. And that set off 4 years of protests and riots here in Western Pennsylvania that came to be known as the Whiskey Rebellion, and culminated when Washington led 13,000 troops to Western Pennsylvania to put down this rebellion. He sentenced Philip Wigle to death for treason. Ultimately, Wigle was pardoned because Washington didn't want to start a civil war in this young country. But that is why we're named Wigle.
Great story. I love it.
It's a great story. So, you know, you talked a little bit already about the lobbying, et cetera. When you talked about Threadbare and you said sister, what does that mean?
So Threadbare is our cider company. So we make wine-style ciders at our cider house on the north side. And Threadbare is really set up and organized in a parallel way to Wigle. So we celebrate there the regional history of Jonathan Chapman, Johnny Appleseed, who lived in Pittsburgh and was actually a contemporary of Philip Wigle in the 1790s. Mm-hmm. And Chapman, of course, created hard cider orchards throughout the frontier using Pittsburgh apple seeds that he collected along the banks of the Monongahela. So we tell that regional story, and we produce ciders that celebrate the apples that Pennsylvania grows, and we have an on-site experience that includes a restaurant, tours, and tons of programming.
It's a lot. It's been cool. So Wigle has won a slew of awards. You've been noted in so many stories and esteemed, you know, in the beverage industry, and a lot of notoriety. Why do you think? What are some of your take? I mean, obviously that's been a marketing strategy and approach, but you have sort of this reputation that you know, you've revived the story and the history, but you're very forward thinking. So yeah. Talk about that a little bit.
I think we've tried to combine the two of really honing in on our taste of place here, which is so storied and has such a long legacy. And so that means committing to local ingredients and the best kind, but also devoting significant resources to innovation. So we have a fairly unwieldy portfolio. We dedicate more than 10% of our annual production to innovation, which financially is a fairly stupid move because we sell every bottle of whiskey we make. So, most, a private equity firm would look at us and say, why are you doing any of this other stuff? You should be just making more bottles of rye and bourbon. But we think it's important to continue challenging ourselves. We learn something every time we develop a new product, a new process, work with new suppliers. And so we really see innovation as a workout for our brains and our production skills. And I think the combination of those two, of telling the stories, the regional history, and working to revive those flavors, as well as the constant and relentless focus on innovation, has helped.
And so you have a local supply chain, right? Has that been your commitment, is to be local? Can you give us some examples of what that means in terms of the ingredients and your relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we say there's this Wendell Berry quote, eating is an agricultural act, and we think drinking is an agricultural act too. So Wigle is the largest purchaser of organic grain in the state of Pennsylvania. And we started with that commitment of using Pennsylvania organic grains really from day one, when this was all conceptual. And we did that for a number of reasons. There's, of course, health reasons for farmers, for our own staff. There's environmental reasons. But one of the biggest reasons was a quality and taste issue. There was a study done by Michigan State that found that organic grains produce more flavorful spirits than conventional. And so it's, that's something that we've continued to grow. We've converted a number of farms from conventional to organic farms, and we've brought new farms online that were fallow, and we've grown with all of our farmers. So there's a saying, in beer, in craft beer, that the only thing local in local beer is the water. And with spirits, we have this opportunity to sort of go a step further, because the production of spirits doesn't require malting of grains. And so a lot of the reasons that brewers don't rely primarily on local grain is there aren't regional malt houses to malt the grains for them, but we can distill unmalted grains, and so we can work directly with farmers.
That's incredible. It's incredible that you make a commitment to 10% just in and of itself in this day and age, even pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. So, you have really embedded yourself in the Pittsburgh community. Are you a Pittsburgh native? I totally have forgotten.
Yeah, I am. I grew up in the North Hills, and I met my husband in Chicago in college, and he's from Texas, but he actually, just coming to visit my family here, fell in love with Pittsburgh, and he was the biggest Pittsburgh cheerleader. And so we ultimately moved. We live in Squirrel Hill, Point Breeze now. And, but the community, there's nothing, I couldn't do a business that wasn't rooted in community. In some ways, alcohol is just my way to get at the community piece to all of this. That was my background before all of this, was community development before I went to business school, and that has sort of seeded its way into everything.
Yeah, it's very, very apparent, and just in the inclusivity and the things that you've done over the years. You've had so many events. You've opened up the doors to your both of the locations that you've had, both in the North Side and in the city, to be a part of the community. It's rather marked. So I don't know if you want to give some examples of that. I want to talk about where we are now in a minute.
Yeah. So we do a ton of programming and fundraisers. We do hundreds of community fundraisers every year. We do a program we do 1 to 3 programs a day. We used to in-person programs.
Right.
And I think part of this is just how we're built. I think companies are always a reflection of their founders in some ways. But the other piece is a reaction to the way that I think we personally perceived the spirits industry and the whiskey industry in particular before we started the company. You know, when we looked at whiskey, the whiskey aisle in stores before we started this company, we saw brands that were doing no work to speak to either myself or even my husband, but certainly not people in our brain space where we were. And we really thought that spirits were sort of this black box for consumers, that even the most educated wine or beer drinkers, spirits were confusing. And we wanted to eliminate as much of that as possible. It seemed that the industry was built on obfuscation, and that was untenable in the long term. So we really wanted to build a company whose value grew as people's education grew. And we wanted to bring people into the fold that had not been talked to by spirits companies for a long time. So that was from the original design of the distillery, our original labels, all of those were, when I look back on it, very reactionary to where the industry was. Everything was bright and bold and modern. We were sort of making a very distinct stand. We had 2 women design the distillery layout, and they designed it so that we laid out the equipment so that we could easily walk people through the space and explain exactly how we made everything. And all of that went to, we want to invite everybody in. We want to be entirely transparent, and we want to bring people in here who know nothing about spirits, and we want to make sure that they feel welcome to ask all the questions they want to ask.
I mean, that's very, very, we have seen that from you over the many years, just in terms, even what you've done just to support the nonprofit community whenever you can has been remarkable. So, you know, listen, here we have, you're booming, you're doing well, you're expanding, you're embedded in the community, you're working with farmers, etc. And then boom, we have COVID-19, right? So the last 11 weeks, 10 weeks. Can we pick up like 10 weeks ago and talk about where you are now?
Yeah, so we've had, like everyone else, it's been a complete whirlwind. We spent the past 2 years working on this very large expansion of our distillery in the Strip District. So we created a restaurant for the distillery, a mini museum, a new bar and tasting room. And we opened that on Friday, March 13th.
Oh my gosh. Oh man.
And then of course, you know, we closed that on Sunday, March 15th. And we closed that down along with the 6 other Wigle and Threadbare sites. So that was all overnight. And then the most interesting thing happened. You know, my husband and I went to bed thinking sort of our world was just falling apart, of course. And then a day or 2 later, the governor closed all liquor stores. And so we went from 0 sales to all of a sudden our online store exploded because we were one of the few places you could buy spirits in Pennsylvania. Now, of course, we know a lot of consumers travel to other states, right, and then Pennsylvanians got barred from those counties. So many people were flooding, Maryland and Ohio liquor stores. But we saw just skyrocketing online sales. And so overnight, we completely transformed our beautiful new restaurant, bar, tasting room, museum into the most gorgeous shipping and fulfillment center.
Oh my gosh.
And then, it's been every week is a new reality to just embrace. So as the governor has now reopened liquor stores for curbside, we've seen a significant drop off in those sales. And so we're readjusting again. We've expanded our drive-through food offerings at our distillery in the Strip and at our cider house on the north side. we're opening our sites at Ross Park Mall for curbside pickup. We're trying to find ways to continue to sort of claw back closer to where we were pre-COVID. But, we take nothing for granted. We know the world owes us nothing. And that's been our philosophy from day one. We live with, I think, like any small business owner, live with pretty much constant anxiety that it's all going to fall apart the next day. You just take nothing for granted ever. So here we are.
So what does that mean for your team? Like with these 6 locations that you've had, and for your staff in terms of the impact, because you have all different kinds of people on your team.
Yes, we do. So we had, before COVID, we had 168 people, both full-time and part-time. And we were able to hang on to every full-time employee that said that they were able and willing to work. And we have about 50 employees now working, and all of them are working different jobs than they signed up for. So we have folks working on shipping and fulfillment. We have our kitchen staffs are labeling bottles now. So we used to host labeling parties where the community would come in and help us label. And now it's, if you are a sous chef or a chef, you're labeling bottles. And now we're trying to, we've been doing these drive-through food events as a way just to keep payroll going. There's, we're not obviously looking for profitability in those at this point. We're just trying to keep people on the payroll.
Mm-hmm. And you're also helping your suppliers, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully. I mean, we're certainly continuing to produce the same, if not more, spirits and cider now than we were when we were open, because we don't have as many conflicts around the space in terms of programming and the public in the space. So we're able to really focus on production. And we're trying to build up an inventory for when we are back in business entirely.
So what do you think needs to happen? Do you think we need to get into the green zone before you'll see your business go back to where it was pre-COVID? Or do you think, because that could be a long time from now?
Yeah, I think we need testing and vaccines, right? And some combination of those. I think even if, I think these color-coded designations are helpful to a degree, but it's really about consumer confidence.
Right.
We're certainly thinking through all sorts of different strategies. We think people will be more comfortable perhaps outside than they will inside. So we're thinking through how to do dining outside in our parking lots versus our beautiful new tasting rooms. I like anyone else, really don't know what it will take at this point and how people will respond. We've had really good responses to our drive-through events. But I think that there's a huge mental barrier to sitting down at a table at a restaurant right now.
I think you're right. I think, Jonathan, there's a good question that was just popped up. Could you ask that to Meredith?
This is a great question, and we almost forgot about this. I mean, you pivoted so fast and started making hand sanitizer early on. I was like, man, I want some Wigle branded hand sanitizer, for crying out loud. Are you guys still making that?
We are. We just are working on another batch now. And I should say, really, it was craft distilleries across the country that stepped up to this need. So we were one of many distilleries that did this across the US. And it was a phenomenal way that we felt like we could contribute. I think, something that's sort of wild to me, and I might be going out too far by saying this, but it would have made a lot of sense to us for there to have been a government order for large distilleries to help in the production for this national need, because all of us collectively, craft distilleries, were not able to supply the nation's needs, and we are the most inefficient producers of alcohol. But you have producers of alcohol that are really built to make high proof, overproof, neutral spirits, biofuels very efficiently, that were not contributing. And that was a huge question mark for us, because we were getting, this has definitely tapered off, but there were 3 weeks where we were getting hundreds or thousands of calls a day. We had a full-time person dedicated to email response, a full-time person dedicated to phone, and then a full-time person dedicated to social media messages of people just desperate for hand sanitizer.
So can we buy some now still?
We have been donating it all to government agencies, so we aren't selling it at all.
Very
Okay.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so just as we bring this discussion sort of, full circle, there's one question out there that's sort of tied into my last question. It is, how is technology powering your business?
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to talk about the tech community as well. So how is tech powering your business?
Well, I think if I could go to the tech community first and foremost, I mean,
Right.
They have, the tech community is, when I think about our core consumer and who's been early adopters of craft spirits, it's certainly the tech community. I think you have people who have just built-in curiosity, flexibility, and thinking, so that when we produce these spirits that are not spirits that you normally see on a liquor store, it's certainly members of the local tech community who are first to the releases, and that is clear to us. It's tech, it's designers, it's sort of forward-thinking people are definitely our early adopters and core consumers. And then technology, it's funny for us because we are also very old school about our production, right? We use old pot, or not an old, but a pot still, a very traditional style of still that favors flavor over efficiency. And so it's this balance, we use, of course, optimization software and lots of technology that Philip Wigle and our whiskey forefathers would not have had, but we're using a lot of the same methodology. So it's, I think it's a nice juxtaposition that sort of mirrors how we view the company as a whole.
So if anyone wants to go now, is your website active? So they can order online. What can they do? What can we do to buy from you?
Oh, we would so appreciate that. We have bottles for sale on our website, wigglewhiskey.com. And we are also have a burger and bottle drive-through every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday evening. And you can buy tickets for that on our website as well. And you get to choose a beautiful local beef burger or a veggie burger, and you get handmade chips and a flask of either our Walkabout apple whiskey or our Afterglow ginger whiskey with your burger. And for Threadbare, we also have cider bottles available on our website, threadbarecider.com, and we're doing a pizza and cider bottle drive-through again, Thursdays through Saturdays.
So anything special planned for this week on a Memorial Day? Anything?
We have a couple sales going on. So we have a rye old fashioned, a bottled cocktail that you can purchase, and we're doing $7 off when you buy 2 of them, which is a great deal. And for Threadbare, we're offering a free glass with the purchase of 2 bottles.
Listen, I want to thank you. I have been a strong supporter of you from the beginning.
Thank you.
You have been a tremendous asset to this community. And as you said, the tech community in particular have embraced you and adopted you and endorsed you. And we want to continue to do that. You have been unwavering in terms of your values, and it shows. It always shows. So everyone, if you don't know Meredith now, you get a little peek into who she is, and the work that she and her co-founders are doing is pretty special. And even though they lifted this from history, it's definitely forward thinking. So on that note, I want to thank everyone. The links are out there. Go to Wigle, buy from them, support them, get a chance to see all that they're working on. It matters. And we hope that you will be back at full throttle very, very soon. So thank you, Meredith, and everyone. Tomorrow we have Mike Moe in from Silicon Valley. And that'll be a great way for you to kick off your weekend and wrap up the week as you understand what's happening on the West Coast. We can probably do some deep dives on some interesting things in terms of investment in companies. So this is Audrey Russo, and I'm here with Jonathan Kirsting from the Tech Council, and thank all of you, and in particular, buy Wigle, and thank you, Meredith, and for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.